Welcome Home, a podcast for veterans, about veterans by veterans, is a project of Willing Warriors and the Warrior Retreat at Bull Run.
Good morning. I'm Larry Ziliaks, Director of Culinary Services here at the Warrior Retreat at Bull Run. This week, our guest is Erica Nance. She's the military liaison for Sora Schools. And this is a online private school organization that helps children all over the world complete schooling, but online, and they can be dispersed around the world. And she's the military liaison, and I really wanted to talk to her about the services that the school offers to military kids around the world and the community that grows out of kids being in this environment maybe throughout their entire schooling. So no matter where their parents are deployed, maybe they get an overseas assignment to Korea and it's an accompanied tour. You know, when you have this option, it also can help the family because a lot of decisions are made. And I remember this from my time in the Air Force, that does the family come with me on this assignment because I don't want to uproot the kids from school. Erica, thank you for coming and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you so much for having me as a guest. I really appreciate it. Happy to be here.
Well, you are a veteran yourself. So if you would kind of start, you're Army veteran?
Navy.
Navy. Okay. So start with, when it comes to your Navy career, why did you choose the Navy and not the Air Force?
Well, the Navy recruiters who showed up at my high school, so.
Was that the only one?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay. So when did you go in?
So 10 days after high school graduation, 1998.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I knew I wanted to join the military because I volunteered at William Beaumont Army Medical Center at Fort Bliss. I volunteered there for 3 summers.
Wow.
And I really got exposed to the healthcare system and said, I want to do that.
Wow. Okay. And Fort Bliss. Whew. Okay.
That's my hometown, El Paso, Texas.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, wow. So you went in the Navy. What did you do in the Navy?
So I was a hospital corpsman for 10 years.
Okay.
And then I navigated to the officer side. I was commissioned as a laboratory officer.
Oh.
And then I served that, and then I transitioned to healthcare administration. So then I ended up at the Defense Health Agency for my final tour.
Here locally in Falls
Yes.
Church, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wow. When did you get out? And tell us about the transition.
Yeah, sure. So in my career, I definitely, like many military service members, I mean, we really kind of put our all into our service. And that doesn't leave a lot of room for family time. That doesn't leave a lot of room for connecting because you're constantly, doing the military assignments and kind of prioritizing that. And so I have 2 daughters. I have one that's 25 and that I did the entire schooling process with since she was, I had her while I was in the military. So she experienced, the typical things that kids experience as far as frequent moves, really trying to uproot and kind of reinvent themselves at every assignment. And then I have a 14-year-old that is going to Sora, and, just really stark differences of my approach from my first child and just kind of navigating that. And obviously as parents, the first one, there's a lot of unknowns, and the second one, seems to benefit from the first experience.
Yeah. Wow.
And, not really by design, I guess not intentionally, but while I was at the Defense Health Agency, some chronic medical issues started to come to surface. And then I ended up having a surgical procedure that really just completely did like a hard reset. I was no longer able to do a lot of things. I was wheelchair bound, very limited mobility. And so I was under care for about a year. Going through the medical board process at Walter Reed and, rehabbing and doing all of that.
Sure.
And also at the same time, my 6th grader, which is my eighth grader now, but my youngest daughter was going to a public school, and they also did COVID. So we had like the COVID environment. I'm at DHA doing, a high tempo COVID response, with the headquarters for medical. It kind of just like, the world kind of collided, right? As far as like the different things and different aspects were happening. And my daughter was really struggling with middle school.
Yeah.
It was a really challenging environment. I didn't really feel supported with the school system, as far as their academic needs. And I came to my husband. I said, "We know the outcome. We could just let them push through, try to do it, see if they come out okay on the other side, or we can really do something intentional about this." And so we started to explore different options, and in combination with my daughter and giving her that agency to say, "What do you think about an online school?" And they were like, "That could be cool." And so we did the admissions process. Sora does a really great job of inviting the student to spend a day at Sora to figure out, is this going to be, an environment? And my daughter really liked it. And so I said, okay, let's give it a try. I didn't know it at the time, but I really was blown away by the schooling system with Sora. It just completely transformed her academic journey.
Well, for our listeners, the webpage is soraschools.com, SORA schools, plural.com. Take a look. They've got a lot of different programs and, of course, all different grade levels and everything. But part of the problem with military kids is all the moving around. And, mom or dad gets transferred, and now I've got to make new friends. And now I've got to go into a different public school system. And let me tell you, not all public school systems are the same. It really does depend on where you end up. You could be at an installation that's in a rather rural area, and they wouldn't know a military kid if they saw one. They just throw kids into the pool and say sink or swim. You could land like here in Northern Virginia, where Fairfax County, Loudoun, Prince William, they are very aware of military children. In fact, Prince William County actually has a county staff member solely dedicated to military children and integrating them into the public school system. So it really does depend on where you're at and what services might be available to you. Now, DOD also has a program. They have personnel on installations that is their sole job, is to help military children adjust. But it's not on every installation. It's really on just some of the major installations. So this is definitely an option. What do you think, in your experience with Sora, that makes them stand out? What stood out to you and said, of all the options for online schooling, this was the one that you felt your daughter needed?
So my daughter, and I'll just get a little bit of a background. So my daughter was very early on introduced to a Montessori style of learning. We were stationed overseas in Naples, Italy. Right. So my oldest was in the Dodia High School there. And then my youngest, she was ready for kindergarten. But, when I tried to enroll, they were like, she's not old enough. She's like two months shy of like the enrollment time. And I was like, you know what? She's ready. She's ready to learn. And I really don't want to wait an entire year because anyway. So I enrolled her in the international school there in the economy, in the Italian economy, which did mostly English, but then they had a little bit of Italian. And I think that very first learning experience kind of really set the trajectory of how she learns. And what I noticed is that when we came back from overseas and she, left that Montessori style, public school just never really fit. And so during the pandemic, third grade is when we shifted to online. And then it was myself and my husband, we all were contributing to like the learning experience. And then I just really realized that is how she thrives. So she needs something different from the public school system that is just, many people experience the public school system. I mean, it doesn't work for everyone. And the same with the DoDEA environment. When you have students that are not thriving and they need something different, parents can feel very isolated, in the options that they have. So a school system like Sora offers that academic rigor, and it also allows students to select their classes and and their learning objectives as far as with a project. So it's a project-based approach that Sora uses. And that is really, and to be honest, I didn't know what that was when I first enrolled my daughter. I just knew that it was student-led, as far as it was up to her as far as how, she would select her learning path. And that was the most attractive to me because it really kind of fit that kind of Montessori style. And what I've noticed is a complete transformation in how she approaches her academic journey, because now it's not just like, oh, okay, it's a grade, it's a worksheet or like a test that no one really cares about. And it's just, it's not really a hands-on experience at school.
Sure.
And at Sora, they actually do get to select their projects, and I can just provide, one example. And the one that I love is she had like a culinary class, and it's humanities, and they had to look at how immigration influences American cuisine.
Yeah.
Which is
hugely. Yeah.
And part of that is, looking at it from a way broader perspective. And that's how we look at life, right? As adults, looking at it a bigger perspective, going into like a more problem solving, just aware of our global environment, which I didn't really see in a public education system.
Yeah.
So being able to select, so they had to do a fusion recipe with another student from another culture.
Wow.
And they had to collaborate on what that is, and then also go through the history of those two cultures and kind of marry that. And out of that, they've discovered that they are a phenomenal baker.
Oh, wow.
I was like, wow, who knew that you even had this talent? I don't think we would have found any of that at a public school. They would have just continued to go through the motions and kind of painfully, just, whatever, just to get the grade. And at Sora, students are really encouraged to take charge of their learning, right? And they're in the seat with their learning process. But they're also just satisfying all the basic requirements, because Sora is accredited. So they have to do, all the traditional, different aspects, but they get to be in the driver's seat.
So what were the two fusions? What was the dish?
So I'm from a Mexican background. Like I said, I'm from El Paso, Texas.
Right.
And the other student was German. So they did this, I think it's some sort of pancake and the bizcochito, which is a cookie.
Yeah.
And then they fused it together to make, and it was actually really delicious.
Wow. That's awesome. Wow.
Yeah.
I'm getting hungry just listening to that. Describe for us what that online environment is like. Is it a computer teaching them? Is it a person teaching them? What, a combination of both?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So it's actually to me, scheduled. It's very similar to a college online program, but they also have kind of this structure around it. So they meet twice a day with their house advisors, and they're organized into houses, very similar to Harry Potter. So they have the same group of students that they meet with in the morning and in the afternoon, and then they attend classes. They have about 2 to 3 classes, and that they're 50 minutes long, so very similar to a college. And they're not there to like do worksheets and things like that. The teacher is providing instruction, conversation, and collaboration with the students, and then after class, then they'd work on their projects independently because each student is doing a different project.
And so is this a live interaction? Or
Live.
So it's not like a tape of a teacher just telling them like, a math problem or anything.
Right.
It's actual live.
It's
Awesome.
live
Awesome.
classes.
So, once again, listeners, the webpage is soraschools.com, SORA, schools with an S.com. In the community to the county where you live, is this considered homeschooling?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are you then eligible for whatever services are provided to homeschoolers, such as social interaction programs, sporting? I didn't know, but our neighbors years ago homeschooled their 2 boys and invited us to their graduation. And I'm like, whoa, what is this, out in the backyard? Or what is, okay. And turned out we went down to Richmond to the convention center, and it seemed like every homeschooling kid graduating was there. There was hundreds of them, and they had a little banquet for us. And I remember it fondly because they had made the mistake of setting the dessert out on the table before the entree, and I treated it as an appetizer, which I think confused the staff. But they eventually got me another piece of cake. But I just didn't know such a thing exists. So wherever they are and end up, especially if they're in the United States, they can participate in all those kind of things.
Well, they can do that, but I will just say that Sora, that's another added benefit of Sora, is that it's a global community. So, for example, we just had a meetup in Atlanta where they said, okay, everyone is welcome to come wherever you are. We're all going to meet up in Atlanta. We have another one coming. I think they just did one in San Francisco, Austin. We have one coming up in June. And then for the middle school level, they have a big field trip that's actually coming up on, I think we fly out next Saturday to Orlando. And what they do is have it's a class, it's part of the class where they go and they spend a few days at Disney looking at the STEM aspect of how to design a ride.
Wow.
And then the humanities portion of it is to create a story that will pair with that particular ride. So there's all kinds of opportunities. And actually, in my local area, we have 2 particular families that we meet up with on a regular basis.
Okay.
And they're all Sora students, and we get to connect and, just build community. And it's really just growing tremendously. And
Right.
so that just means more connections are happening.
So any idea roughly how many students are part of this community worldwide?
So right now, I believe I have to
I ballpark it.
I believe it's 440 students at this moment.
Right.
And of course, and growing.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And so let's talk a little bit about the benefits for military children and military families. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I see that the main thing is that continuity in not only education, but being with your peers throughout the process. So whether you're in Spain on a military installation or in Indiana or Fort Bliss, wherever, you're with the same kids. And you get to be friends with them, and I'm sure they interact offline. But what do you see as some of the benefits for the military family?
Yeah, I think for military families, it really does serve as that linchpin of that continuity. I mean, and like I said, I mentioned I had an older daughter that we had to uproot constantly.
Mm.
And I'm just seeing the benefits now. And like I had mentioned, I was going through the medical evaluation process. I wasn't sure, am I going to be medically retired? Am I going to be, am I going to PCS? I mean, we really didn't know what the outcome was.
Mm.
And what I love about Sora and what my daughter was very excited about was that, what, Mom, it's okay. It doesn't really matter what happens or where we need to go because I can just take Sora with me.
Yeah.
And so that was really powerful when she had said that, because then that anxiety from my side as a parent of like, okay, yes, we will have to find and build local community. But as far as like the schooling environment, they have the same teachers, the same students, and they can, continue to build the confidence. I mean, because that's really what I noticed, as a parent, every time, that movement would happen, the confidence would, kind of sink a bit, right? Because
Yeah.
like you need to figure out what's what. And so I can just kind of see the opposite in my 14-year-old because they're building the confidence and there's nothing that's going to take that away.
Yeah, right. And every kid is different. You've got some kids that are shy, socially insecure, that don't make friends easy. And so those kind of PCS moves are really hard on them. Then you've got your, kids that play sports and are out there and they'll play any sport and they don't have any trouble making friends on the team, So I think, a lot of it comes down to your children. When I hear private school, I think super expensive. No doubt there's a cost for Sora schools. I mean, there's got to be. But is there any kind of financial assistance or anything available for military families, some sort of sliding scale or, where enlisted would not pay as much as officers? How does it work if a military family is interested?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that question because affordability is really important for military families. And Sora is very passionate about serving the military population. The CEO, Garrett Smiley, is actually a former military child. And Sora understands that military families have a wide range of pay scales. So they have a tier-based tuition grant program that they offer based on total annual income for families.
Right. Okay. Again, listeners, the webpage is soraschools.com. As we kind of wrap up, I really appreciate you coming. I think we just went through April, which is the month of the military child, and these kind of things are really important because these are the things that families struggle with all the time, and it's the deployment and the impact that has on the family. The jobs that military service members have are stressful in and of themselves. Sometimes they're working in very dangerous environments. Sometimes they're working around dangerous things. Not only you could be on the tarmac refueling planes, and it seems like a pretty easy job, but there's inhalation injuries. There's all sorts of exposure to chemicals and all sorts of things that you take home to the family, and everything you do has an impact. And uprooting the family is really a big deal. And when you talk about career service members, they're looking at sometimes 7 to 13, 15 moves over a 25-year career. It's crazy. And yeah, I know that, well, the military pays for it, and so in addition to uprooting the family, you can't make a PCS move without it costing you money. The government does pay for it, but you know what? When you get to that new house, you got to buy toilet paper. You got to buy a bunch of stuff. It doesn't have a screen door. Well, gosh, we need to have a screen door. There's all sorts of costs that are incurred. Some families get dumped into installations where our listeners know from previous episodes, 90% of active duty service members do not live on military installations. They are forced to seek housing in the community, which often is more expensive than what they're given for base housing allowance. Or they have to live far away from the installation to find something that's reasonably they can rent. So you have that. Then you have spouses that uproot a career and they're a professional, and it's a tremendous hassle for that professional to transfer their license, which means you have a minimum of probably 6 months where that spouse is not bringing in income. And so on top of that, then you're trying to get your kids into a different public school system. I really think that military families have to at least examine the option, because anything you can do to relieve the stress on the family is really going to benefit everybody. And so Sora schools may not be for you. There may be another program out there. But I guarantee you that when you look at Sora schools, you're going to see quality education. It's not cheap, but it's worth the money. And because that is something that is going to impact your children for the rest of their life. I really do thank you for coming and sitting down with us and talking about your experience. These are the kind of things that we like to do episodes about, that are resources that families sometimes don't even consider.
Yeah.
And so really, thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Well, for our listeners, we'll have another episode next Monday morning at 0500. You can find us on all major podcast platforms. Like and subscribe. We're also on YouTube and on Wreaths Across America Radio. So until next time, thanks for listening.
The Welcome Home podcast is brought to you by Willing Warriors, a nonprofit organization serving active duty service members and veterans since 2012. To learn more, please visit our webpage at willingwarriors.org.